Hey, this is John Lee Dumas, the founder and host of Entrepreneurs on Fire. And if you're wanting to learn how to embrace change and navigate through disruption as a leader, then listen to the Leadership Is Changing podcast with my good friend, Dennis Giannoutzis. He's prepared to ignite.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Dennis Giannoutzis.
I'm in lovely Las Vegas.
Las Vegas. Isn't that where you normally live or you live somewhere else?
So Vegas is my U.S. home, but 75% of the time I'm in southern Mexico, next to Guadalajara.
Okay, cool. Now, the other thing I wanted to ask you was about your background. So tell us a little bit more about you and about your background.
Yeah, I started my careers off in the military, right out of high school, where I was able to serve with the Marine Corps Special Operations. When I left my military time, I got lucky break, started with Apple, worked with Apple for many years, from Apple to Amazon. From Amazon, I started dual wielding my days because I had so much free time. And so I worked at Amazon during the nights, and then I'd work at a startup during the day. And then I abandoned Amazon to go work for startups in Santa Monica and LA, where I had opportunity to work with pharmaceutical startups and tech startups. Found my way into healthcare proper, air quotes. And so that was my last venture. I worked at a chronic healthcare organization that focused on the elderly. And then I started a telehealth organization, which I recently stepped away from full time to let a new CEO run it. And then on a sabbatical, also in air quotes.
So you've actually transitioned from being a CEO for a healthcare organization, Optiva, and you've gone now to go and do more of your own thing. Is that correct?
Correct. I operate my own investment.
Yeah, cool. I want to ask you a question around that because I work with a lot of execs and they look at what they're going to do next in their actual careers and their career paths. And there's different areas they can take. For some of them, they're wanting to leave the large corporates or a corporate role and go out and do something into a startup, or they might want to go and do their own thing, whether it be a business or go out contracting. But in other areas, as well as what I call a portfolio, they might want to go in, do some investment into some organizations. They might do a small amount of consulting, 2 or 3 directorships, but they have more of a different lifestyle because they may not work 5 days a week. It's a little bit less. What for you now transitioning from, say, that CEO role to go and doing your own investment business and so forth, what is that transition being like for you?
Well, at first, it kind of felt like I was doing something wrong or playing hooky on work. Even though I was very busy from day one, I've always been an investor, but not as my primary means of entertainment. And so I felt weird at first because it wasn't as structured. I had this whole team of directors and executives waiting for me in these meetings. So it was odd. I felt misplaced. But now my day starts when I usually want to start it. I focus on my different part of my brain. So I'm learning music and language. I'm more analytical in mathematics. And so that's how my brain functions in a very organized way. But I'm trying to learn an additional language, trying to be fluent in Spanish, as well as learn to play the guitar. And so when I'm not doing that, I do my investments.
Yeah, very good. And so also I wonder what it's like for some people, because some people want to go and do this, but it's holding them back, or they're holding themselves, maybe fear and other things, the unknown. What would be your advice, or what would be 1 or 2 things you might say to them about if they are thinking about transitioning to go and do something else, what they should put in place or what they should be thinking about before they go and do it?
Curious is important for everyone as a person with a family. Understanding what you can afford to do is always one of the biggest hurdles. But for me, it was more so I realized one day that I was running on a treadmill chasing a carrot, and the life that I was seeking to have was standing next to the treadmill watching me. And once I realized that, oh, wait, I don't have to work. I've been smart enough and made good enough decisions, made more good decisions than bad decisions at this point. And so I don't really need to show up every day and run a company. So at that point in time, I realized it was time to do something different, something more for myself and more for my family.
Yeah, sometimes I think it's actually sitting there right in front of us, right? Like you said, it was just sitting to the side of the treadmill, the life that's probably looking there, probably had its arms folded, shaking its head at you, going, come on, man, get off that treadmill and let's get on with it.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Now, what got you into leadership, or how did you get into leadership?
Ooh, I just fell into it. So I've always had an issue standing off at the side and watching things be done certain ways when I know they can be done a certain way, or watching things lack leadership. And when I first joined the military at 17, I was thrusted into a leadership role in charge of 63 people. And I'd been there for a couple of days, a couple of nights, and slept any of it. And then they're like, oh, well, this guy's running things. And so put me in charge of platoon. And then I was in charge of my entire basic. I was in charge of 63 folks. And then from there, I found myself in follow-on schools where I fell into leadership roles. And it's always been that way. And I think it's more so where I have an idea of the way things should be done. And so I have the gumpture to say something about it and do something about it. So I just put myself in those positions.
Yeah. And do you have high expectations of yourself and others when you've had that idea of, I know how things should be run?
Yes. And so I have no one expects more out of me than myself. And that's his own set of issues. And I think that, yes, I have high expectations, but I also, which plays a problem when you're not the person in charge. And I have been a leadership challenge in my days. However, I learned once from a guy, Ray Jarvis from Apple, one of my leaders there, where he said, sometimes realizing when you're not the person with the answers is the most complex question. And so learning that in my life, where I'm like, okay, I'm not the person who's going to lead this or going to answer these questions, these concerns, these voids, that's difficult for someone with my mentality.
And then the next question is, who should be the person running this now?
Yes.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. And tell me, this person could be alive or from history. Who's your favorite leader and why?
Oof. I think there's a lot of people that really come into, I don't think one person.
Sure.
My son, his middle name is going to be Theodore, from Theodore Roosevelt. So I'm a very big fan of Theodore Roosevelt. And one of my favorite quotes by him is, success is the positive mindset we keep between failures. And so I'm a big Teddy Roosevelt fan, but also on the charisma side, I'm an Obama fan. I'm a big Ronald Reagan fan. And so it goes back into the ancient times. So I picked from the different characteristics. I don't think there's one perfect leader, but there's a lot of good examples.
And is there one common theme possibly through all of those three different names that you've just mentioned? And there's probably others as well. Is there a common theme that you admire about them?
Yeah, I think it comes down to more so how they behave in some of the most difficult situations. You look at Theodore, you look at Obama, and you look at folks like Ronald Reagan, who during their presidencies, they had very tough times, trying times, recessions, war, and the way that they bared that burden and still maintain themselves as a calm leader, but also being human at the same time, it's admirable.
Yeah, very good. Now, if you were to have a coffee, in other words, you and Theodore Roosevelt are sitting on a bench, a park bench somewhere, having a coffee or whatever you want to drink, would there be a question? What would be the one question you want to ask him?
That'd be difficult. I would have lots of questions, but if I sat there and I asked Theodore, what would be the thing that encouraged him in his darkest hours? So what's that one thing you look to when you failed beyond the period in which you thought you were going to failed at things you normally succeed at, or just the dark moments? What gave you the strength, with internal, external, to step back up, brush off your shoulders, and go out and begin? Because we all fail, but it's like, what makes us say, I'm going to endure this opportunity for failure one more time and get up and do it again and then fall down? So that'd be an interesting understanding of his mindset.
Yeah, I think that's what John Wayne talks about, right? The courage is falling off the horse, getting back on the saddle and doing it, feeling the fear and just doing it anyhow. Great. Whereabouts are you in the world today?
So I am in Huntsville, Alabama, which is about 30 minutes south of the Tennessee border, home to the Space and Rocket Center and lots of other space and rocket aerospace development here, and also home to Redstone Arsenal, which is a big branch of the U.S. Army.
Oh, that's awesome. Wow. So do you see a whole lot of rockets flying past you?
Not flying past us, but definitely on display. Yeah, so we're doing a lot of really neat innovation within the aerospace and space and missile defense arena here. So it's a very exciting place to live. It's absolutely beautiful as well.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. And the listeners won't be able to see it, but I can see behind you, you've got a beautiful sign there that says focus on the good. And I think that's a beautiful sort of statement to start on here as well. Now, Megan, I've given the listeners a little bit of an introduction to you. You're the founder and CEO of marketing and public relations firm called Flourish. Tell us a little bit more about your background.
Yeah, so my background is I actually studied hospitality management at the University of Central Florida in Orlando. Didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I loved that industry. And so I fell into that and fell into marketing, honestly. I started off working for a small engineering company doing sales and customer service, but ultimately it became a marketing role. And I didn't realize that at the time. I've never taken a marketing course in my life, so I'm a little bit of a self-taught marketing professional, but I ran a nonprofit for a couple of years here in North Alabama. After that, I worked for a large ad agency out of New York called McCann Erickson. They're part of the Interpublic group of companies, and they held the contract for the U.S. Army account for about 9.5 years. So I served on the U.S. Army account for about 5.5 years out of that time, and supported their mission with recruitment efforts along the Eastern Seaboard. And then I worked for a small tech software company here as their director of digital marketing for a couple of years before I was part of the third layoff that they had in the 3 years that I was there. So I was laid off of my job and figuring out what I wanted to do. And it was at that time that my oldest daughter at the time said, "Mom, why don't you just start your own business and do your own thing?" And it was a little bit of a dare, but I'm a very competitive person. So I was like, you know what? Challenge accepted. And that was in 2018. We started Flourish in 2018. And now we've grown like crazy and have pretty much doubled in size year over year, if not more than that. And it's just been a phenomenal journey as an entrepreneur. Never really set out to own a company or start a business. It just happened, which I think is the best way, if I'm being honest, because it's really taught me so many amazing things, not only about myself, but just about the industry as a whole. And yeah, so we've been around for a couple of years and I just absolutely love what we do.
Wow. And I'm sure some of my listeners are people who are in the corporate world or working somewhere and are being made redundant, or possibly there could be some change coming on. What was the transition like for you to go from being in that corporate world, possibly salaries, well, not possibly, but salary happening every sort of month and money going into your account, then all of a sudden making that decision to go and start your own business? What was the transition like for you?
It was extremely scary and made me want to throw up on a daily basis, if I'm being completely honest with you. I never had the intent of going down this path. And I think it's so funny. Now I mentor high school students who take entrepreneur classes, which is really neat. And I've never taken a class on entrepreneurship, never taken a class on any of that. And so definitely a self-taught business owner. But the challenge was one that, to be completely honest with you, I think that being in the corporate world, climbing that ladder for as long as I did, I was very successful in my career, loved my career. But it wasn't until I was laid off and forced to figure out a different path that I was truly energized the way that I am today. I almost feel like I went through a complete transformation at the age of 35. And I'm so thankful that I did, because I think I got a little bit complacent in the roles that I was in and got a little bit too comfortable with some of the progression paths on professional development that were just, looking back, I think a little bit too easy and too achievable. And going down this path of starting my own business, really without having the knowledge around how to do it, absolutely, without a doubt, shook me to my core and shook me outside of my comfort zone, which has been an absolute blessing just from a development perspective, both personally, emotionally, spiritually. It's really allowed me to discover a side of myself that I didn't really know I was capable of being. And so it scared me. I've never worked harder in my entire life. You definitely don't start off making any money whatsoever. And so that was a big transition, going from that comfortable living style to not, but really being forced to figure out how to make ends meet. And at the time I was a single parent of 2 young kids when this happened. So I didn't really have somebody to fall back on that I could lean on to help me along the way. I just had my kids looking at me and knowing that I was going to try this thing. And they were the biggest cheerleaders I had and still are to this day. But it was such an amazing opportunity, and one that, as we've progressed throughout time, has just gotten better and better. And just, we've been received so well by the community and have just surrounded ourselves with such amazing people. So it's been a phenomenal learning opportunity, and one that I never really expected I would reach at this point in my life.
Wow, that's an awesome story. And thanks for sharing it, because I think there's a lot of people out there who probably are complacent in their roles today, who are probably contemplating about going to do another role out in another organization, or that they want to start a business, but there's that fear of starting or stepping over, or I talk about crossing over that line to go and do what they want to go and do. And to be encouraged by your children, and that's great, and having there as support is good. But then also doing it on your own, but then you said a key thing, I think, at the end there, which is about having the right people around you.
That was one thing that I really noticed early on, that I think being a woman, being a type A personality, with a DISC assessment, I'm a D. So I have a very strong personality. I like to say I'm the one to raise my hand and say, I'll take lead. And sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not so great. But it was one of these things where I really learned to be courageous. And I quickly had to check my ego at the door and realize what I was good at versus what I wasn't good at. And I very quickly learned that I could not do everything on my own. And in order for me to be successful, I really needed to let my guard down, be vulnerable, ask what one would call the stupid questions, surround myself with people, again, that are way better at certain things than I was. And I still do that to this day. So I think that was a big moment for me, was really almost doing that. You've got two columns on a piece of paper. What are my strengths and what are my weaknesses? And what am I really good at? And that's where 80% of my time should be spent in order to be the most efficient and impactful individual that I could be. But then also, again, realizing, okay, who is really great at these areas that I am weak? I don't have to tackle all of that on my own. And I think as a single parent, you just assume that you have to do that sometimes. And so that was a big realization that I think was very transformative for me, to just put that aside and say, it's okay for me to lean on folks who really have that skill set, and this is where they're experts in. And when I did that, it just sped things up so quickly and really allowed me to eliminate a lot of the stress associated with feeling as though I had to carry all of that on my own. But then also recognizing that, hey, listen, I think this is one of a strong suit that our team has, is saying, when a client comes to us with a very specific need, like a lot of companies, I could say, sure, we can do that, no problem, because they're wanting to make the money. We turn business down, and we're very honest to say, hey, this is not our area of expertise. However, we know a great resource that we can pull in who is way better at doing this thing than we are. And our clients respect us and appreciate us for having that honesty and transparency in that dialogue. And of course, ultimately, it sets everybody up for the best successful path forward.
Yeah, no, that's great. Though I think what I'm hearing here, listeners, is you don't have to be everything to everybody is one thing. And that's not just being an entrepreneur. That's also even if you're in a large or small, medium-sized organization and corporate world as well, you don't have to be everything to everybody. You got to get the right people around you. But yeah, I love what you're saying about the fact that I know what my strengths are, and that's what I need to focus on. I have to get other people in to carry on the other areas. Sure, you could do those other areas. There's no problem there at all. But it's about being a little bit smart to free up your time. Because there's people I've been working with, Megan, and one in particular lately just said to me, but this and that. I go, hang on, where's the delegation happening? Are you actually delegating? It's just probably easy for me to do. And I go, yeah, but then if you delegate, you're going to free up time to do the things that you complained about that you don't have time to do. And they're like,
exactly.
Okay. Yeah, it's very good. And I like the other thing too is about ask the stupid questions. They're not stupid, but we feel stupid at times when we're asking them. Yeah. Have you ever been in a meeting and you wanted to ask the question, you thought, nah, that's stupid. And then someone else 2 minutes later asked the question, you went, damn, I wish I had asked that question.
Oh yeah. I always tell my kids that if there's a chance, if you have a question in class, some of your classmates will have that same question too. So don't ever feel embarrassed about asking the question. And two, I'm a big proponent, especially, and I know we'll talk a little bit about leadership styles in a bit, but a big proponent of ensuring that, our team, me as an individual, anybody, you have to be equipped with the information that you need to be successful. And otherwise you cannot go into a business agreement, a discussion, an argument, a debate, a marriage, a relationship, anything without context. And if you don't feel as though you have the context in order to put the best foot forward, you are going to be a disservice in that particular engagement or relationship. So I'm a big proponent of asking for context to ensure, okay, what I heard you say was, we work in communications, and oftentimes men will say blue, women will hear red, right? So making sure that we can really break down any of those communication barriers. And oftentimes that comes from the lack of context behind one's opinion or perspective on things. Going back to the stupid question, you may say something, but I understood it a different way. So in order to ensure that I understand it the way you're trying to communicate it, I do have to ask those questions. And they're not stupid. They're questions that will only set us both up for a more successful engagement.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Dennis Giannoutsas. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.